notification that one must consider fair use. And so that didn't stop him.
This is where we're talking about with the, we're making the analogy to a denial of service attack. The 10-day period for taking the content down is a long time. And when you're talking about O days, or you're talking about competitive advantage in the marketplace, 10 days is a long time if parts of your site, and at times we've had to take down significant parts of people's sites to meet the statutorily required 10-day period. Oh, and I wanted to note that we were mentioning counter notices. If you receive a DMCA takedown notice and you don't want to go right out and hire an attorney to defend you, I would check out chillingeffects.org. When I was in law school, Chilling Effects was just coming up. Wendy Seltzer, I think she was with Berkman Center at Harvard Law School, and she was later with the FF, and I think she's a law professor now, but she was one of the founders of Chilling Effects. And Chilling Effects addresses cases like these, and they address copyright, patents, trademarks. But if Wendy created a form that all you have to do is put in some information, and it will auto-generate a counter notice for you. So it'll save you if you do choose to do this without advising an attorney. Although we recommend that you might want to do that first. But if you decide to do it, go to chillingeffects.org and you can get your counter notice right there.
Right, so here's some examples of abuse. Basically, the Federici case again. He figures out that when he files these takedown notices, the content goes down, and then a counter notice is filed, but the content can't come back up for 10 days because we're statutorily required to keep it down in order to maintain the safe harbor. So what he does is he contacts 6 of his colleagues, and he has them file DMCA takedown notices for different portions of the Advocates for Children in Therapy site. And as a result, the site, or parts of the site, are down for 2 to 3 months.
And you've heard of double jeopardy when it comes to like some civil trials or criminal. This is like dodeca jeopardy when it comes to your content. It's the same stuff over again, taken down. So this is not something that you want to be involved in if with the DMCA takedown notices as we have.
So this is another disturbing trend that we see, which is these backdoor takedowns. And essentially, there are a couple different classifications of ISP in the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and one is as a common carrier. And common carrier ISPs share no liability with the content that user hosts anywhere, so they don't have to comply with the takedown provisions. They just get their safe harbor. The other type of ISP is like Project DoD, where the content actually resides on the box, so the ISP is in control of the content. So I just want to be clear that there's those two types of classifications. Now, the second classification of ISP is required to register a designated agent with the Copyright Office. This is so takedown notices can go to that designated agent. And for Project DoD, I happen to be the person that's registered as a designated agent. But there's no specific wording in the DMCA that tells the person sending a takedown notice that they need to send it to this designated agent. It's just sort of implied that that's the case. And over the years, what we've seen is a de facto migration to looking up the whois record in AARON, getting the abuse contact information off the IP address, and contacting that person instead, which may not necessarily be the ISP, let's say, down the chain that's in a leaf node, like that's actually the leaf ISP as a service provider. And so you can start to see there's going to be a lot of dangers here. If just a handful of providers are the ones that are deciding whose content stays up, we have something that looks a lot like media consolidation in the late 90s. They are going to be exercising editorial content over what you host. And as a side note, I also wanted to talk about anybody that thinks they're going to get DMCA takedown notices. This is just from my experience. Anybody that thinks they're going to get them and has an ISP or is hosting content, virtual private servers may be a really bad idea because if you're on a virtual private server, the content that you're hosting is actually in the control of the ISP above you, which makes them not part of the former classification of ISP as a common carrier, but makes them part of the classification where they actually could be liable for the content. So beware of like cloud hosting, cloud storage, virtual private servers. If you're going to be hosting content, that's a bit risky. So I have a couple examples of backdoor takedowns. Actually, I have one example of a backdoor takedown. But over the years we've been doing this, we have way more than I can possibly enumerate here. In fact, it's been the #1 reason that we've been kicked off of providers over the last 12 years, from corporate providers to like nonprofit collectives. We've been kicked off of a ton of different internet service providers. And never for content that you would think is, the type of stuff the DMCA was crafted for the, what the MPAA would like file sharing or movies or whatnot. One case really stands out though. We used to host this site called hackblock.org, and they're still around. I think they're like a Chicago 2600 group, or maybe they started out that way. But anyway, it's a hacking collective, and they publish a zine. And they found out about a particular individual that was trying to get members of their organization arrested by entrapping them and whatnot. And they had a bunch of dialogue between this individual and law enforcement, and they put it up in their zine to show people like, look, this person is trying to entrap us. He's trying to get us arrested. So this individual does the errand lookup, finds the IP address, and files a takedown notice. But the takedown notice doesn't come to us. In fact, it doesn't even go to our colocation provider, which is the upstream provider of us. It goes to the upstream provider of our upstream provider, which was AboveNet at the time, which is a large organization and probably, or not probably, definitely enjoys common carrier status. Nevertheless, AboveNet winds up exercising editorial control over the content and says, take this down or all the users are going to be shut off on your box. So we tell the user, take it down. And so what they do, and this is pretty common, they put in the place of the thing that was taken down the actual DMCA takedown notice. It's a sort of way of saying, look, the DMCA is being wielded to silence our fair use, our free speech. So they put that up. And a day later, AboveNet receives a DMCA takedown notice for the DMCA takedown notice, the original DMCA takedown notice. But rather than being outraged that this would happen, they actually get livid with us, and they tell us, we're not going to play whack-a-mole, take this content down, this is your last warning, all of your users will be shut off. And so ultimately they exercise editorial control. Now today we have a much more functional relationship with our upstream provider, where with Silicon Valley Web Host, at least in one of the nodes that we have, and that's where the Project DoD versus Federici stuff happened. And when he attempted to backdoor us, he went at the upstream provider after we had allowed the user to comply with the counter notice and the content came back up, and he tried to get the ISP to take it down. And they came to us and we said, no, you're a common carrier, maintain your common carrier status. We've already been through the process of all of this. The content is clearly fair use. You don't need to involve yourself. Well, they told Federici this, and he came back and threatened them more, and they got right on the edge of kicking us off. And then we contacted the EFF, and the EFF stepped in and said, okay, no, look, you really need to stand up for these guys. They're doing the right thing. Don't worry, Silicon Valley Web Host, if you suffer liability as a result of this, we'll back you up in court. And so they said, okay, we're a common carrier. And of course, nothing happened to them.
So again, endless chain of attacks. It's like the shampoo, directions, rinse and repeat over and over again with the same stuff. So, and the problem a lot of ISPs also have is it takes a lot of time to verify that these are new notices, in fact. So a lot of ISPs won't even read, it's just, okay, it's a DMC takedown notice. Okay, this is a problem, we'll take it down. And we found more times than not, ISPs don't, they're not even going to look at it. It comes right down.
And of course, Project DoD versus Federici is an example of this. Federici winds up, after the content has come back up, sending us in their takedown notice, which is originally what prompted us to follow 512F and pursue him in court to stop him from doing this. And that's not just this one user, right? And I should also say, really think about it. Like, what for-profit ISPs are really going to use 512F to defend their users, right? This is expensive. You're talking about, we've already been engaged now for like 2 years plus in court with this person. And we just thought that, this was the right kind of case to stand up for. And this particular person, Federici, has silenced all dissent of his medical practice out on the internet, period. You cannot find anything that talks about the dangers of this stuff with his name attached at very least. And all of those users that he's silenced have slowly migrated to us over time. So anyway, we get through the case and it's thrown out in Maine for lack of personal jurisdiction. And he sends us a third takedown notice. So now we're on our third takedown notice from him, and the thing is, it's still really time consuming because we have to go through every single thing and say, okay, is this something he's already noticed us for before, right? And there's no provision in the DMCA that says you can't do this. There's maybe an implication that you can't because of the 10-day denial of service attack, but there's nothing in there that says explicitly like this is abusive process or something.
And using the 5112G, we think that it has been used so he can figure out who his online anonymous people are who are critiquing him. So if someone has a handle and he can't quite, he's been sending the DMC takedown notice to the ISP, and the ISP, well, such as us, we're not going to say, hey, that handle is this person's name, here's her name. He's using this, we think, to find out who she is, so he could also sue her for libel or something like that. So we are finding that the DMCA is being used to really destroy people's anonymity online. And as I mentioned, a lot of the female attorneys on this case and the women who want to be plaintiffs are really concerned about some of the stuff that's been going up online that we've been able to trace has been coming back related to this case, most likely by attorneys, or we've actually found some evidence that it might actually be some Russian group that you tell them you want this name libeled, and they'll libel it, like they'll set up a fake Facebook page, like for me, for instance, and it's loaded with Russian malware. So it's that type of stuff, there are not a lot of attorneys or plaintiffs who want to stand up to that, so it takes a lot of gusto. But this isn't fair, where we're having to, if we want a counter notice for this user, we have to use, put her identity in the counter notice. We're not having a good time with that.
Yeah, and so this isn't required by the takedown notice, right? So there's agent wording that makes the person that's claiming their copyright has been infringed, allows them to hide behind a firm or something else. There's also specifically a section, 512H, which requires a court order in order to get the identity of the person. However, the counter notice doesn't require that. The counter notice explicitly wants the personally identifying information. And so what we saw, and this is in a separate case, like I said, remember there's a bunch of people that came to us. This is a totally different domain. It's a support group for survivors of this type of therapy. So I can say she, so it turns out the gender of this individual is known. She runs the site stopchildtorture.org, and she puts up this NBC video. Well, she actually had it up on YouTube, and YouTube DMCA'd it, and she didn't want to lose her identity, so she wasn't able to counter notice. So she put it on us, and the NBC video basically just talks about, it's like one of these hardline videos, talks about attachment therapy, and it's sort of like a 2020 piece, right? And so she puts it up. It's NBC's copyright. It's not his copyright at all, and he files a takedown notice. Now, what she's doing here is trying to compare the holding techniques illustrated in the video with this recent case that says these things called face-down takedowns, they're like security guards in schools use them for kids, are potentially lethal. And so security guards in school are no longer able to do the face-down takedown on like high school kids, right? So she's saying like, look, well, this is the exact same type of holding technique, like isn't this also potentially lethal? And so, of course, he files a DMCA takedown notice for it, and so we have to take the content down. But this time when he filed it, he sort of specifically says, like, and if this person's going to file a counter notice, which he knows they're probably going to, they better include their personally identifying information. And that's when we found out, oh, wow, look at that. The statute actually requires personally identifying information for the counter notice. And so ultimately, the content stays down because our user wasn't willing to release her identity. But what she did is she wound up having the content hosted on a service called VideoWeed, which is outside of the jurisdiction of the United States, and